If you had the chance to run away with the love of your life, what would you do? Hi, Khaki Scouts. Want to watch a movie? In the spirit of getting through requests, I have had this one sitting for a little bit. Kyla, thank you so much for your patience. Also, I hope that I am pronouncing that name correctly. We are going to be talking about another Wes Anderson film that I think is absolutely fascinating. Releasing in 2012, this movie is packed with a star-studded cast focusing on star-crossed lovers. We today are going to be talking about Moonrise Kingdom. Moonrise Kingdom opens in the Bishop household on a rainy day in 1965. We see Susie, one of the main characters, looking out every single window of her house with a pair of binoculars looking for the mail person who has a letter that she's looking forward to. In this scene, we also meet Laura and Walt, who are Susie's parents, they're lawyers, and they're just boring adults. Also in this scene, Susie's letter arrives and she's really excited about that. On the island of Penzance, the film's narrator talks about how there is going to be this huge storm that is coming in the next 3 days. And then we move to a nearby scout camp called Camp Ivanhoe. We meet Scoutmaster Randy Ward as he comes out of his tent and he begins his morning rounds checking in with all of his scouts. At breakfast, though, he realizes that one of the more unpopular campers named Sam is missing. He checks his tent and it's clear that Sam broke out and ran away, and now they have to find him. So Randy then reports this missing child to Captain Sharp of the local island police and describes to him all the things that might be on Sam's person. There's this moment where a phone call operator named Becky patches a call through where Sam's foster family say that they no longer want to take care of him because he's too much trouble. Randy then starts to pack and prepare for this rescue mission, and he readies a bunch of other scouts and their dog Snoopy in order to go and find Sam. On their quest to find him, what they do is they interview with a bunch of the locals, including Susie's parents. And as Laura and Walt are being interviewed by Captain Sharp, Susie uses her binoculars and she spots Sam, who is in a nearby meadow, and she goes to him and they reunite. And after they reunite, we have a flashback to a scene that happened a year ago. In this flashback, Susie is a part of her church's production of Noah's Flood and Sam is in the audience. He finds her sitting in the dressing room with other girls in bird costumes, and he asks Susie, "What kind of bird are you?" Later, we watch as he boards the bus with a letter that she gave him in his hand. Back in the present, Sam is utilizing his scout skills in order to guide them both through the wilderness. They're hiking from Summer's End to the island of Penance to escape and live together. During this walk, he finds a turtle with the name Albert scrawled onto its shell, and he catches a fish to fry for Susie. Susie then reveals that she has a bunch of stolen library books, one of which is Coping with a Troubled Child, which prompts Sam to laugh at it, but quickly apologizing for hurting her feelings. Back at the Bishop home, Laura informs Walt that their daughter went AWOL. And this begins this whole investigation, so to speak, of the house where the captain is trying to comfort Walt, and Laura is playing this Hank Williams song, and then Laura also finds all the artwork that Sam has painted. Laura's the one who's carrying the team in this scene. She then stumbles across some letters that were written between Sam and her daughter Susie that kind of show what the plan was for these two, and it's shown through voiceovers and flashbacks. And so the search party decides to go to this meadow where Susie and Sam were supposed to meet up and begin their search. However, we go back to Sam and Susie and they realize that they are being followed and that they are trying to be found right now. Sam and Susie are initially found by this kid named Redford, who is Sam's rival. Sam warns Redford not to take another step, and Redford charges towards them. Chaos ensues, and the next thing you know, the pack is fleeing. And during this scuffle, we find out that Susie stabbed Redford with a pair of scissors and the dog Snoopy died, which is just, dude, number one way to make me cry in movies, dead dog. That was not necessary. Anyway, Back at the dock, Redford is carried away in a gurney. The bishops confront Randy, but before they can get too into it, the narrator interrupts and says that he knows where the kids are. At this very discreet and isolated cove, Susie and Sam are seen playing and splashing in the water. He paints her and he makes her some earrings out of fish hooks and beetles. Very sweet, very romantic. And what Sam then does is he pierces one of Susie's ears with it because she's a child and hasn't had her ears pierced yet. And then Susie talks about how she thinks orphans are special, and they share this really romantic moment between the two where they are dancing at arm's length, which is typical child behavior. And they share a kiss together and they have this really nice moment of romance. The next morning, though, Sam and Susie wake up surrounded by everyone who was looking for them. Laura grabs Susie away from Sam, and Randy informs Sam that he is now homeless because this is the perfect time to do that. And then on the boat ride back to the mainland, one of Susie's brothers tells her that she's a disappointment to the family, and Susie responds with, "Good, I want to be," which is just such a banger response. Good for her. On a separate boat then, Randy comforts Sam about how he's homeless and that he doesn't really have anything going on in his life anymore. It's great. It's perfect for him. And then at the station, Captain Sharp puts in a call for social services to come for Sam. And as they're waiting for social services to come, Captain Sharp decides to bring Sam home to watch over him until they're ready to take him away. And something that Captain Sharp tells Sam during this moment of dinner and winding down after the events of the day is even smart kids stick their fingers in electrical sockets, which I think is just such a good description of how you're blinded by love sometimes. And then chaos kind of starts to happen again. Now that Redford is out of the picture, there is a new scout who decides to stand up for Sam and rally all the troops to stand up for Sam's best interests. So while Laura is out of the house to go and break up with Captain Sharp, the troops then in a way kidnap Susie and try to take her out of her home so that they can reunite her and Sam. And the pack, now with Susie in tow, go to Sharp's house and they rescue Sam from him. And something of note during this is that the narrator steps in again and warns of the oncoming storm, but there's young lovers, so that doesn't really matter right now. Then it's discovered, of course, that Susie is missing again, and Randy wakes up to his entire troop missing. And so he telegraphs another scout leader at another camp nearby. And while they're distracted by this telegram, the scouts and Sam approach Cousin Ben and they ask him to perform a marriage ceremony between him and Susie. And Cousin Ben agrees pretty easily to marry these children, so he decides to place them in a boat, but before they leave, Sam realizes that Susie's binoculars are missing, so he goes to rescue them. However, they're on Redford's person, and so what Sam does is he attacks Redford again and steals back the binoculars and goes back to this boat that Susie and Ben are on. And now it's sort of this race against the clock, where everyone who's trying to find the kids is rushing to get them before the storm comes. However, Susie and Sam are just wanting to get married before they get found and separated again. And during this chaos, Commander Pierce decides to strip Randy of his titles of Scoutmaster because he lost all of his scouts, which I think is fair. However, he ends up saving Captain Pierce when a totem that's on fire falls onto his cabin. And after that moment, everyone then rushes to the church where Susie and Sam first met. And Sharp and the bishops get there when social services also arrives there. So this kind of like standoff between the captain and this government official who is trying to take Sam away from this island. And while that standoff is happening, Sam and Susie climb to the roof of the church where they have this last kiss and final words moment because they know that their time is starting to end. However, Sharp climbs to the roof of the church and saves the kids, and in that moment decides that he will take care of Sam and adopt him. In calmer times, we see the narrator share more information about this storm that was coming. We see Susie in her house reading and Sam painting a picture for her. When all the children are called to the dining room for dinner, we see Sam leave the painting in Susie's room before climbing out the window and seeing Sharp help him in his escape. The final image of this movie is Sam's depiction of this cove where him and Susie really had their night of romance. It dissolves into the actual place and thus ends Moonrise Kingdom. And of course, you know this video would not be complete if we didn't talk about the numbers this movie did. The reception on this movie was actually pretty good, I would say. It had a budget of $16 million and it made $68.3 million in box offices. So I'd say that's a pretty good job. Those are pretty good numbers he's putting up. And looking at the reviews, audiences seem to love this film, even to this day. On IMDb, it's got a 7.8 out of 10 with 300,000 reviews and a Metascore of 84. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 93% on the tomato meter with an 86% audience score with over 100,000 reviews. Broadly speaking, audiences absolutely loved the whimsy and visuals of this movie, coupled with that sort of nostalgia around young love. And I think looking at young love from such a true lens is such a fascinating thing to do. And with that being said, I think that is a criticism I saw quite largely in this film. The beach scene with Sam and Susie is, I think, the most divisive scene in this entire film. It toes that very, very fine line between exploiting children versus showing the truisms of what young love looks like in that inexperience and wanting to learn more about your partner. I believe that this scene does a pretty good job at showing that child innocence when it comes to sexuality and not really understanding what your own body is like, much less your partner's body. However, I think that could have been shown without Sam touching Susie's breast. I understand why it was done, but I think it could have been communicated just the same without that being shown. However, in my research, I found that the way that they shot this scene was, I think, the best they could have done. This specific scene was saved for the very, very end of filming when the two actors would be really comfortable and close with each other. That way they could feel better about this scene. And on top of that, it was done on a completely closed set, which means it was only these two actors, the cameraman, and Wes Anderson. So since they did this scene, I think it was done the best way it could have been done in terms of at least protecting the children. But now that you have my thoughts on that scene, I want to go back to just talking about the movie as a whole because I think it is fascinating. The story of Sam and Susie is so beautifully done, especially when you couple it with how Susie's parents' love life is going. Where Walt and Laura's marriage is kind of falling apart and Laura is having an affair with Captain Sharp, you see Sam and Susie going on this whimsical, idyllic sort of romantic adventure together. The whimsy of this film perfectly captures what it's like to have that childhood nostalgia and that sort of hope and excitement you have when you're experiencing young love. And it's one of my favorite films, I think, of Wes Anderson's because of how well he builds the world. Everything in this world is so well told through the lens of a child, and I think that is such a fascinating thing to see because more often than not, when things are told through the lens of a child, they don't capture that sort of nostalgia, hopeful feeling that kids have. And this movie is so grounded in the world that it builds, where everything feels very real and tangible, and you understand that you're watching this film through the mind of a child that has a huge imagination and is wildly in love. And I think that this And I think that this lens is furthered when we look at the social services character in this film. In this movie, it is only one person who refers to herself as the social services. She's this very cold and robotic individual with a monotone voice, and I think that that sort of symbolizes to Sam how she's here to steal him from his whimsical, love-filled life. She is, in a way, the villain of Sam's life, and I think that portraying her in that way that was very cold and distant and unfamiliar to Sam, I think that was the best way to really show what that relationship was like. And while we're talking about world building, I think that the way that Sam and Susie meet is so perfectly how children interact with each other, whether they think they're flirting. These child actors did such a good job at making the romance between Sam and Susie so perfectly awkward. One of the first things that Sam uses as a pickup line for Susie is asking her what kind of bird she is, and I think that that is truly what any middle schooler would do, where they think that they're spitting game or something like that. And it's so funny to watch that now as an adult and know that this child thinks that they're doing this grand romantic gesture, but as an adult, it's so funny to think that someone could flirt with me by saying, "What kind of bird are you?" It's just so perfect at capturing what that childhood innocence is like. And I do really believe that the whimsy of this film is amplified by the music in this. Alexander Desplat is one of my favorite composers ever. He is so good at capturing what whimsy and love is like, and just listen to the soundtrack. It's so good. And I'm curious to know what you all think, so leave a comment down below. Have you watched this movie before? If you haven't, why are you going to watch this movie now? Because it's very good and I highly recommend it. And if you made it to the end of the video, dude, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you coming on this journey with me. Thank you again, Kyla, for recommending this movie. It is incredible. I loved it. And if you have anything else you'd like to see from me, let me know down below, dude. I'm starting to power through requests, so I might be able to get to yours in a timely manner. I'll send a little smooch your way, and I'll see you next time.